So welcome back. Now we're going to do a bit of an activity that anyone can do at home as well with pen and paper to help us think intentionally about priorities and life balance, and you're going to be able to explain it better than I am. So what are we going to do as an activity?
It's just a really basic activity to kind of assess like our lives and the structure of our lives, or like what we're spending our time doing really at this point, and it can be broadened into lots of other conversations, but we'll just keep it simple for today. So the simple part is just to start by drawing a circle on your page. Doesn't need to be perfect, but what we're doing is making a pie chart of your life as it is right now. So for anybody watching, you just get out a piece of paper and draw that circle, and then we want to try. It doesn't need to be like quantitatively perfect, but we're just trying to get an idea of how are we, if that pie is 100% of your time, how are you spending your time more or less? And it's going to vary. I always say with balance, that idea of balance is not a daily thing. I think balance can be a weekly or maybe even for some people a monthly thing. Like we just get busy and we don't have time to do all the things that we might want to do or need to do in a day or a week. But more or less, if you can look at the average kind of day for yourself, how are you spending your time? So sleep is going to be part of that.
Okay, so it's a 24-hour then?
Yeah, because we rob ourselves of sleep. We take from that bank sometimes when we're feeling like we are not getting enough time for ourselves. So some people stay up late chronically or whatever that looks like. But sleep, employment for most people is going to be part of that. I can name a few if that's helpful for people, but hobbies, activities. There's no real rules here. You get to kind of divvy that up. You might have different types of activities that you have. You might have one for reading or study or something, and you might have, or if you're a student, that might be another part. Time, like socializing time, there might be different types of socializing. Some might be more related to professional responsibilities and some might be more just for fun. Exercise for some people might be, can you name any that I might be missing? There's probably some obvious ones I haven't hit. But
I think you hit some good ones. Kind of like family time. I'm thinking also like in my own day-to-day life, like cleaning is something that somehow takes up a lot of time, like laundry and dishes and all of that. Administrative stuff like paying credit cards.
Even just emails and banking and that stuff. So however you break it, you don't need to get in the minutiae of that, but just having some sense of this is what that looks like right now. And some of you might be doing this while we're talking about this, so that's great. Did you want to spend a minute to do that, or?
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay. Kind of thinking through, like you said, sleep is part of this. And then if I'm thinking kind of 24 hours-ish, work takes up a lot of that.
And the point is not to have the perfect circle. If you have a gap and you're not sure what to do with it, you could also do this just writing percentages if you didn't want to do that. If you're not a visual person and you just want to write it out in a list and be like, I probably spend.
If you want to bullet point it more. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
That would work too. Because I'm realizing as I start mine, I'm like, no, it's not going to.
It's not going to pan out mathematically.
There's a lot of time we just kind of goes away,
and that's so true too. Like I've done this before in work context where I'm trying to like divvy up my work hours to one project to another, and once you do it, you're like, this isn't adding up. Like I don't know where hours are disappearing, but somehow they do.
Yeah, I mean, there's even stuff with anybody that is a parent. There's time that goes with that. Even just time with cleaning and cooking, like that takes. Often you're just like, I don't know where that time went. That took an hour and a half, and it doesn't feel like it should have, but it did.
Oh, it's so true. Well, it can take a while to transition between tasks too. Exactly. Like stopping one thing to start another. Somehow you lose a lot of transition time there.
And then unplanned things. Whether it's phone calls or emails or those texts.
Yeah, that's so true.
Another way of looking at this then, it would be kind of like, how do you feel when you look at your pie? How does that feel? What are some things you might notice that are, positive things or comfortable things? And what are some things you notice that maybe you're like, that's something new I wasn't aware of?
Yeah, well, I was thinking of it in the context of like a, regular weekday. In the sense of work is a good portion of that, Monday to Friday for me. In some ways, I would love there to be less work now because I love what I get to do. But definitely when you see the amount of time that's allocated to work versus things that feel important like friends and family in a given Monday, Monday or such, it can feel like a lot of work.
Yeah.
but that's also kind of part of life, I guess.
Yeah, but it can feel never ending sometimes.
Yeah. I also feel like one thing I put in here was driving time, because I actually feel like I lose a lot of my day driving. I commute a lot.
That's a good point.
And I'll often listen to podcasts or something while I'm driving, or like take phone calls, like try and make good use of that time. But I do lose a lot of time to driving. And then I also put housekeeping in there, because in my mind, like everything from credit cards to dishes can kind of fall generally under that. And then friends and family, and then also phone use, which can overlap a bit with administration and friends, whether that's texting a friend or paying a phone bill or something, but then often that's social media or something you get distracted by.
Which can feel like sort of social connection sometimes if you're sending people things or you're laughing about things, or there's messaging. So it's a gray area where it's like, does that feel like healthy, good use of time? Does that feel like an important way to connect? Because nowadays, like, that might be the primary way you connect with, if you're a long distance friendship or something, that might be the primary way that you connect with people. So it can feel really important, even though it also feels sort of like it leads to like that doom scrolling as well sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like I relate to that a lot, because a good number of my really close friends don't live in Canada, and so I'll often be on my phone either texting them or calling them or something like that, staying up to date with them. But I'm a really bad texter, and so often replying to people ends up feeling like an administrative task in the back of my head, and it feels more like something I should do. I always want to talk to them, but kind of that to-do list of, I didn't reply to them and I have to do that. I'm just very bad at texting back, and so that ends up feeling like its own task on the list.
Yeah. So things that you would, if you were, now the next part of this, I guess, is to kind of look at, and you can draw this out if you're a visual person, you can make a list, you can reflect on this, but if there were some things, are you noticing some things that you would like to be different, or that potentially, that aren't, you're spending more time on things that don't energize you, or you're noticing that there's things that time's going by and you're not spending as much time on that stuff as you want to?
A few things stand out to me. One, I do think, like you're saying, I draw from the sleep bank once in a while. Like, I'll, average like 6.5 hours, which is on the low end of really what it should be. So that kind of stands out to me as something that, like, I'm sure I could cut corners somewhere else to bring a bit more balance to that. Another one is, like, one thing, I write a lot for work. It's something I do professionally. And so because of that, it's often not something I jump to as a relaxation thing, but I also love to write creatively, in a journaling way, like, for mental health, as a creative outlet and all of that. And by the time I get through a whole day of writing at work, I don't find that I come home and make time for that. But at the same time, when I look at a chart of what's in my day, I'm like, that's still important to me, but I'm not finding a place to fit that in very much. So that would be a big thing. And then also, like, more time for friends and family, probably. It can be such an easy thing to think they'll be there tomorrow. I can touch base with them later or catch up with them later, but this project feels really important. This deadline feels really impending. So probably finding more balance in those things.
And do you notice different seasons of the year, not necessarily literal seasons, but just times of the year where things naturally fluctuate? Like more daylight for me is a huge factor, but for a lot of people it is. But those kind of things too are, I think, also transitions. This, sometimes looking at this as, certain friendships. For me, my kids are getting to an age where they're not as dependent on me, and so that's been a big transition in time for me, and trying to figure out how to navigate that. And use that time differently has been an adjustment. So
that's a really good point too, of how it kind of changes with even things like the age of your kids or such. Like, I have 2 little nephews. One was born just like a month and a half ago, and I've found since becoming an aunt, my older nephew's almost 2, and like 18 months is what my sister would say. And I found since becoming an aunt, I want to make more time for those sorts of things, like spending time with my nephews or dropping by their house briefly after work or something, where I might not have made time for those things before. But I think, like, the little tiny kids change so much so quickly that if I go a week without seeing them, something big is different.
Yeah.
So it feels more like a big deal when you miss time with them.
Yeah.
Whereas your friends, if you don't see them for like, 2 weeks or something, it doesn't feel like much is different in adult relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that in fact has made me more aware of the value of kind of making time for friends and family, even if it's just in small increments in the day.
Yeah, and I think it's just assessing and looking at that. And it's not about whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. It's just noticing, like, are there some things that are really important to me that I'm not doing, or maybe I'm doing a really good job. Sometimes reframing stuff too, like work for a lot of people is exhausting, I think, and tiring, and they kind of feel like they're chasing their tail a bit. And sometimes that reframing of like, if it's a job you don't like, that's hard. If it's a job that you do generally like, but it's just really busy and never ending, that's also hard in a different way. But sometimes saying like, oh, I actually, rather than like, I need to do this, it's like, oh, I actually kind of get to do this. Like, I'm thankful that I get to grocery shop, as much as I don't like shopping, but it's like, I'm thankful that I can go and choose what I want to eat for the most part, and that I'm privileged enough to be able to do that. Or I'm thankful that generally the job I wanted is what I do, and I get to kind of have some flexibility with that. So sometimes that can be helpful, but it's also not taking away the fact that we need to be aware when those things are just hard and we don't want to do them.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and as much as work takes up a lot of the chart, I also realized that like there's a good amount of variety in my work too, where if I were to divide the work portion of the chart up, there would be different sections in that too. Time I'm connecting with people versus time I'm writing or doing administrative tasks or, even commuting and stuff like that. Like it's nice that there's at least variety in the work portion as well as everything else. Yeah,
it's good. So tying that all back to like, also mental health and just noticing like balance and all of these things are kind of important, and balance is a myth. I think it's that idea of finding a balance that fits for you, kind of having a menu of things that you want to fit into your life and trying to make sure that you, as much as possible, you can draw from that menu, depending on what's going on for you. So so I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great task, and this is also going to be making me think probably for the rest of the week, and especially as we're entering the new year, it's a good time to kind of assess
that's true.
how you spend your time and everything. This is really helpful. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this mini-series. I hope you found something helpful in here, whether that was some of the information that Stephen was sharing about mental health, about accessing care, and about being able to tap into where you're at in your own mental health journey as a leader. Or some of the tools that we talked about, whether that's mindfulness or exercises like this to kind of stop and help us think intentionally about how we're spending our time. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.